The Duke of Ashbourne did not shout. He never shouted. He stood in the middle of his own great hall, with 12 servants lined against the wall, and he looked at his wife the way a man looks at a stain on his boot. "You have eaten at my table for 6 months," he said. "You have worn my mother's dresses, and you have brought this house nothing." He reached into his coat. He took out a single coin. Then he crossed the floor, took her hand, turned it over and pressed the coin into her palm. "There is no free bread in this house," he said. "Go and find work." Nobody moved, nobody breathed. The Duchess of Ashbourne walked out of that hall with her back straight and her hand closed tight. She walked down the corridor. She reached the door of her own cold room, and only then did she open her fingers and look at what he had given her. She looked at the coin for a long moment. Then her knees went out from under her. Because the face stamped into that silver was a face she had not seen since she was 10 years old. It was her grandfather. The fire in the east wing had not been lit for 11 days. Verity knew because she had counted. She counted a great many things now. 11 days without a fire, 4 candles left in her drawer, 6 months since her wedding day, 9 days since her husband had last spoken to her, and that had only been 2 words, and the 2 words had been moved aside. She was awake before the house that morning, as she always was. She had learned that if she wanted hot water, she had to go down to the kitchen and carry it up herself. And she had learned it was easier to do that before the servants came down, so that nobody had to decide whether to help her. That was the strange thing about Ashbourne Hall. The servants were not cruel to her. They were something worse. They were careful. They stepped around her the way people step around bad news. She was halfway up the back stairs with the jug in both arms when Mr. Crail found her. The steward was a tall, dry man of 50, with a soft voice and a way of appearing in doorways. He watched her climb 3 more steps before he spoke. "His Grace wants you," he said, "in the hall now." Verity kept hold of the jug. "May I put this down first?" "I would not," said Mr. Crail. "He has had a letter." And he smiled a little when he said it. She did not understand that smile then. Later, she would think about it for a very long time. The great hall of Ashbourne Hall was the coldest room in the house, and the grandest. Black and white stone floor. A ceiling so high that voices came back to you a half-second late. 9 generations of Ashbourne men looking down from the walls in gold frames, all of them with the same long jaw, and none of them smiling. Her husband stood in the middle of it with a letter in his hand. Julian, Duke of Ashbourne, was 30 years old and looked older. He was not an ugly man. That was the cruel part. He had a fine, cold, handsome face, and when she had first seen it in a church 6 months ago, she had thought, well, perhaps this could be something. Perhaps a marriage arranged by 2 dead fathers could still turn into a life. She had thought that for about 4 hours, until the wedding supper when he had put down his glass, looked at her and said, "Understand me. I did not want this. I will not pretend otherwise." And then he had gone to London for a month. Now he stood in the hall and the servants were already there, all of them. Mrs. Pike the housekeeper, the cook, the footmen, the girls from the scullery who could not have been more than 14, 12 of them lined up along the wall like a jury. Verity stopped in the doorway with the jug still in her arms. "Come in," said the Duke. She came in. She set the jug down carefully on the floor by the wall, because there was nowhere else to put it, and she was aware of every single person in the room watching her do it. "Do you know what this is?" he said, and held up the letter. "No, Your Grace." "It is from Halloway and Sons," he said. "It is the 4th this year. It concerns the debts of this estate." He let the paper fall to his side. "And it concerns the money that was promised to me when I married you, £12,000. Do you know how much of it has arrived?" Verity's mouth was dry. "No." None of it, he said. Not 1 shilling in 6 months. I have written to my uncle 4 times. I am sure you have. He does not answer me, she said. He never answered my mother either. I have no way to make a man answer a letter. Something moved across the Duke's face then. Not doubt. Something more like impatience, as though she had said her line wrong in a play he had already read. Let me tell you what I believe, he said. I believe there is no money. I believe there never was. I believe your family found a titled fool with debts and no time, and I believe they dressed you up and sent you here, and I believe they have been laughing about it in whatever hole they crawled out of ever since. That is not true. Then where is it? She had no answer. That was the terrible thing. She had asked herself the same question 100 nights in a cold bed, and she had no answer. And standing in that hall in front of 12 people, she could not invent one. Her silence seemed to satisfy him. Very well, said the Duke of Ashbourne. He turned so that he was speaking to the room and not only to her. Then we will have honesty in this house if we can have nothing else. Mrs. Pike by the wall closed her eyes. This woman is my wife, he said. She is the Duchess of Ashbourne. She is also, so far as this estate is concerned, a debt. She eats. She burns candles. She wears my mother's clothes because she arrived here with 3 dresses and one of them was mended at the elbow. She contributes nothing, and she will continue to contribute nothing unless something in this house changes today. Verity looked straight ahead at the wall. There was a portrait there of the 4th Duke. She looked at his gold buttons and she counted them. 9. She counted them twice. So her husband said, something will change. He put his hand into his coat pocket. There is no free bread in this house, he said. Not for me. Not for Mrs. Pike, who is 61 and works 14 hours. Not for the girls in the scullery. And not for you. He crossed the floor towards her. He took her right hand, the first time he had touched her since the church, turned it palm upward, and pressed something small and cold into it. Go and find work, said the Duke. Then he closed her fingers over it with his own hand, and let go, and walked out. Nobody in that hall spoke. Verity stood absolutely still. She was aware that if she moved too fast she would break, and if she broke here, in front of them, she would never be able to look at any of them again for as long as she lived in this house. So she did not move fast. She bent down. She picked up the water jug because it was hers to carry and nobody else was going to carry it. She straightened. She turned. And she walked the length of that black and white floor with her chin up and her hands shut tight, and she did not look at a single face. She heard Mrs. Pike say her name once, very quietly behind her. She did not stop. Her room was in the east wing, where the fire had not been lit for 11 days. She got the door shut behind her. She set the jug on the boards, and then her hand began to shake so badly that she had to hold her wrist with her other hand to keep it still. Go and find work. She had been the daughter of a schoolmaster. She had scrubbed her own floors and cooked her own dinners and nursed her own mother through 2 winters of coughing, alone, in 2 rooms above a saddler's shop in Bath. She was not afraid of work. She had never in her life been afraid of work. That was not what was shaking her hand. What was shaking her hand was that he had done it in front of the scullery girls. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She breathed. She thought about her mother, who used to say that a person can carry almost anything if they put it down for a moment first, and she made herself count to 20. Then she opened her fingers. It was a silver coin, about the size of a shilling, worn smooth around the rim. Not a king's coin. She knew that at once because there was no crown on it. It was a bank token, the kind the private banks had struck years ago in the bad years, when there had not been enough royal coin to go around, and a man's promise had been stamped in silver and passed from hand to hand. Around the edge, in small clean letters, it read, HALLOWAY and SONS bath, 1 shilling payable on demand. And in the center of it, in profile, was the face of an old man with a heavy brow and a blunt nose and a jaw like a shovel. Verity stopped breathing. She knew that face. She had seen that face once when she was 10 years old on a wet street in Bath. Her mother had gripped her hand so hard it hurt and pulled her back into a doorway, and Verity had asked who the old gentleman was, and her mother had waited until the carriage had gone past before she answered. "That is my father," her mother had said. "He does not know you exist, and he does not want to." The coin fell out of Verity's hand and rang on the floorboards, and rolled and lay flat. She was on her knees before she knew she had moved. Her surname was Halloway. She had never thought anything of it. Halloway was a common enough name. There were Halloways in every town in the West Country, and her mother had married a poor schoolmaster and been cut off for it, and had died in 2 rooms above a saddler's shop with nothing to leave but a wedding ring and a name. Verity picked the coin up off the floor with both hands. Halloway and Sons, Bath. "It is from Halloway and Sons," her husband had said an hour ago in the great hall holding a letter. "It is the 4th this year. It concerns the debts of this estate." Verity sat back on her heels in a cold room with the coin in her palm, and one thought going through her, over and over, like a bell. Her husband had just thrown 1 shilling at her and told her to go and earn her bread. And the man whose face was on that 1 shilling was the man who owned every debt in this house. She did not tell anyone. That was the first decision, and she made it sitting on the floor of a cold room with the coin still in her hand, and she made it for a reason that had nothing to do with cleverness. She made it because she was ashamed. If she walked back into that great hall and said the man on this coin is my grandfather, there was only one thing that could happen. Her husband would look at her with that long, tired, patient face, and he would say, "Then write to him. Ask him for the £12,000 you owe me." And she would have to stand there and explain that she could not, that the old man on the silver did not know her name, that her mother had written to him for 19 years and he had never once written back, that the last letter had gone out 4 days before her mother died, and no answer had ever come, and Verity had walked to the post office in the rain every day for 2 months to check. She would have to stand in front of 12 servants and say out loud, "I have a rich grandfather, and he threw us away like kitchen scraps, and he would not cross the road to spit on me." She would rather scrub the floors. So she wrapped the coin in a handkerchief, and she put the handkerchief in the toe of her second-best shoe, and she put the shoe at the back of the wardrobe. And then she went down to the kitchen, because it was 9 o'clock and there was work. Mrs. Pike found her at the scullery sink an hour later, with her sleeves rolled to the elbow. The housekeeper stood in the doorway for a moment and said nothing at all. She was 61 years old, wide and short, with gray hair pulled back so tight it made her eyebrows look surprised. She had been at Ashbourne Hall since she was 15. She had known the Duke since he was a boy in a nightshirt, and she had opinions about that morning which she would have died before speaking aloud. "Your Grace," she said at last, "that is Annie's work." "Annie is 14, said Verity, "and there are 91 plates. There are 91 plates every day. Then there is enough for both of us." Mrs. Pike came in and shut the door behind her, which was not a thing housekeepers did. She stood by the sink with her hands folded in front of her. "He should not have done that," she said quietly. "In front of the girls, he should not have done that." Verity did not look up from the water. If she looked up she was going to cry, and she had decided, quite firmly, that she was not going to cry in a scullery. "Mrs. Pike," she said, "may I ask you a question about the house?" "You may ask." "Where does the money come from?" The housekeeper's hands went still. "The wages," Verity said. "The coal, the flour. When you buy a sack of flour in the village, where does the money come from? From the estate. The estate has no money. He said so himself in the hall in front of everyone. He said this house is drowning. Verity set the plate down. So where does the coal come from, Mrs. Pike? There was a long pause. Somewhere above them a door closed. Come with me, said Mrs. Pike. The steward's room was on the ground floor at the back, a narrow office with a barred window and a smell of ink and damp paper. Mr. Crail was not in it. He rode out to the tenant farms every Tuesday morning and did not come back before 2. Mrs. Pike went to the cupboard and took down a Japan tin box and set it on the desk and opened it. Household money, she said. It comes to me the first Monday of every month, and I sign for it and I spend it, and I write down every farthing in that book there. £55. It has been £55 since before you came. Verity looked into the box. There were notes in it and a canvas purse, and the purse was open. She reached in and took out a handful of coin, and let it fall through her fingers back into the tin, slowly, one piece at a time, and with every piece the sound in the room got a little louder in her ears. Shillings, sixpences, half-crowns, some of them king's coin, worn and ordinary. And among them, again and again and again, the smooth silver tokens with the heavy brow and the blunt nose and the jaw like a shovel. She counted 11 of them before she stopped counting. Mrs. Pike, she said, her voice came out strange. Where does the £55 come from? From the bank. Which bank? The one in Bath, said Mrs. Pike. The one that holds the mortgages, Halloway's. Verity put her hand flat on the desk. The estate borrows it, the housekeeper went on, not seeing her face because she was tidying the notes back into the tin. It has borrowed it for years. Since before the old Duke died, he was fond of horses and fonder of cards. God forgive him, and he left it in estate. Every quarter Mr. Crail sends the accounts to Bath, and every quarter Bath sends the money, and every quarter the debt gets bigger. She shut the lid. The bank owns the West Farms. The bank owns the timber. Mr. Crail says that if Halloway's ever calls it in, we are all of us out on the road by Michaelmas. And that is why nobody in this house says the word Halloway out loud where His Grace can hear it. Verity heard herself ask very calmly, and what is the family called? The family that owns the bank. Mrs. Pike gave her an odd look. Halloway, Your Grace, she said. That is why it is called Halloway's. I mean the man. Is there a man? There is. Mrs. Pike frowned, thinking. Old Josiah Halloway started with nothing, they say, a clerk's son. My sister's husband banks with them at Bath, and he says the old man still came into the counting house every day at 70-odd and knew every account by name. She picked up the tin. Hard man, they say, but an honest one, which is more than you can say for most of them. Verity stood in the steward's office and understood two things at the same time, and they did not fit together, and the not fitting made her feel as though the floor had tilted. The first thing was that her husband had thrown her grandfather's money at her that morning and told her to go and earn her bread. The second thing was that her grandfather had been sending money into this house every single month for years, into the house where his granddaughter was sleeping in a room with no fire and eating at a table where nobody spoke to her and being called a debt in front of the scullery maids. He had been paying for her candles, and he had never once come to see her. She went back to her room and she sat down, and she thought about it until the light went out of the window. There were only two explanations, and she turned them over and over like a coin between her fingers. The first was that he did not know, that the ledgers in Bath said Ashbourne, estate of, and nothing more, and no clerk had ever thought to write down the name of the Duke's wife, because why on earth would they? That she had walked into her grandfather's account book without either of them ever knowing it. The second was that he did know, that he had always known, that he had let his own daughter die in 2 rooms above a saddler's shop, and let his granddaughter be sold to a bankrupt duke for £12,000 that never came, and had gone into his counting house every morning at 70-odd, knowing all of it, and had never lifted his pen. Verity was 22 years old. She had learned by then that when you have 2 explanations and one of them is kinder, the kind one is usually the lie. She took the handkerchief out of the shoe and unwrapped it. "Payable on demand," said the letters around the rim. "Then I will not demand anything," she said out loud to the empty room. "Not from you, not from him, not from anyone in this house." She said it the way people say things at 22 when they are hurt, and mean every word, and have no idea at all what they are actually promising. Then she wrapped the coin up again, and she got out her mother's mending basket, and she thought about what a woman with 3 dresses and no money could actually do in a village of 400 people. Her husband had told her to find work. Very well. She would find work. She would find it publicly, and she would find it well, and she would find it in the one village in England where every soul for 6 miles would see the Duchess of Ashbourne doing it. Downstairs, in the room with the barred window, Mr. Crail came back from the farms at 4 o'clock instead of 2. He stood in the doorway of his office for a while, without taking off his coat. Then he went to the cupboard, took down the Japan tin and opened it. He looked at the notes. He looked at the canvas purse. He counted the tokens in it, and his lips moved slightly while he did it, and when he had finished, he stood very still for a moment with the lid in his hand. He was a careful man. He had been careful for 11 years, and careful men notice when a thing has been touched. He put the tin back on the shelf. Then he sat down at his desk and took out a fresh sheet of paper, and dipped his pen and wrote at the top in his small, neat hand. "Sir, I write on a private matter concerning the Duchess." The village of Ashbourne Cross had 1 street, 400 souls, a church with a leaning tower, and a shop belonging to a widow named Sarah Braid who took in sewing. Verity walked down into it on Thursday morning, with her mother's mending basket on her arm. It was 3 miles. Nobody offered her the carriage, and she did not ask, and by the time she reached the bottom of the hill, the hem of her dress was 6 inches deep in mud. She stopped at the horse trough by the churchyard wall and looked at herself in the water and put her hair straight with her fingers. Then she went into the shop and asked Mrs. Braid for work. The widow was 50, sharp-faced, with a mouth full of pins. She took the pins out of her mouth one at a time and set them down on the counter, all 6 of them in a row, and only then did she speak. "You're the Duchess." "I am." "The Duchess of Ashbourne." "Yes." "And you've come into my shop," said Mrs. Braid slowly, "to ask me for sewing work, at 2 shillings the week." "Is it 2 shillings? I did not know. That is more than I hoped." Mrs. Braid stared at her for a long moment. "Sit down there," she said, "and hem that. And if it's bad work I'll say so, and you can go back up the hill." Verity sat down on the stool by the window and hemmed the sheet. She had been hemming sheets since she was 7 years old, in 2 rooms above a saddler's shop, for a mother who could not see well enough to do it herself by the end. She did it now with her head down and her stitches small and even, 11 to the inch, and she did not stop until it was finished. Mrs. Braid took it to the light and turned it over and ran her thumb along the seam. She did not say anything for quite a while. "2 shillings the week," she said at last, "and you don't sit in the window, you sit in the back. I'm not having the whole street come in here to gawp at you like a bear in a fair." The whole street came in anyway. By Friday, 3 women had come to buy thread they did not need. By Saturday it was 11, and one of them had walked from Nethercombe, which was 5 miles, and had bought a paper of pins and stood looking at the back room door for 4 full minutes before Mrs. Braid asked her whether she was buying anything else. By the following Wednesday, everyone from Ashbourne Cross to the Bath Road knew that the Duke of Ashbourne had put his wife out to work for 2 shillings a week. And that was when the thing happened that Verity had not planned, and could not have planned, and which changed everything that came after. The village did not laugh at her. The village got angry at him. She did not understand it at first. She had expected mockery. She was braced for it. She had made herself ready for it on the walk down. What she got instead was a farmer's wife pressing a twist of paper into her hand at the churchyard gate with 4 eggs in it, saying, "For your walk home, my lady, it's a long way up that hill." What she got was the blacksmith stepping out into the road on the second Friday and walking beside her, without a word, for the whole first mile, because the light was going and a woman should not walk that road alone at dusk, and then touching his hat and going back. What she got was the schoolmaster, a nervous young man named Ellis, who stopped her outside the church and said that he had 31 children and no assistant and could not pay a penny, and had heard that she could read Latin, and would she, no, of course not, forgive him. It was an impertinent thing to ask a duchess. "Tuesdays and Thursdays," said Verity, "after the shop 4 o'clock." Mr. Ellis stood in the road with his hat in his hands, and could not think of a single thing to say. She was happier than she had been in 6 months. That was the strange, shameful, wonderful truth of it, and she turned it over on the walk up the hill every evening. She had a stool and a basket and 31 children who called her Miss, because nobody had told them how to address a duchess, and she had not corrected them. She had somewhere to be. She had 2 shillings a week, and she kept it in a tin, and at the end of the 3rd week there was 6 shillings in the tin, and she took it out and counted it on the bed and laughed out loud, alone, in a room with no fire. 6 shillings. She had been given £12,000 on paper and had never seen a farthing of it. 6 shillings that she had made with her own hands was worth more than all of it. And in the village, in the shop, in the schoolroom, she learned things. She learned them the way you learn things in a place with one street, slowly, sideways, and completely. She learned that the West farms had been sold in everything but name, and that the men who worked them now paid their rent to an agent who came from Bath twice a year. She learned that the timber on the North Ridge had been marked and counted by strangers 2 summers ago, and that everyone knew what that meant. She learned that when old Tom Wick had gone to the hall in January to ask for a new roof on the cottage where his wife was coughing, Mr. Crail had told him there was no money and sent him away, and that the rain had come through all winter, and that Mrs. Wick had died in March. And she learned, from 4 different people in 3 weeks, always in the same lowered voice, the name of the bank in Bath that held every stone of Ashbourne Hall in its fist. She said nothing. She sewed and taught and listened, and at night she lay awake and built the shape of it in her head, piece by piece, the way you build a picture from the edges in. Her grandfather's money had bought the roof over her head. Her grandfather's money had not bought a roof for Mrs. Wick. She did not yet know what she was going to do about that, but she had stopped feeling ashamed somewhere in the 3rd week and started feeling something else, and the something else was steadier and colder and much more useful. The Duke came down to the village on the last Friday in October. He had not intended to. He had ridden out to the Bath Road on business and came back through the cross because the lane was flooded, and he was passing the church when he saw a crowd of children in the yard and a woman among them. He pulled up his horse. She had a boy of about 6 by the hand, and she was walking him back and forth along the wall, and the boy was reading aloud off a slate, very slowly, the way children do when the words are still separate things. Verity's head was bent. She was listening with her whole body, the way you listen to someone who might stop. The boy got to the end of the line and stopped and looked up at her. And Verity laughed properly, out loud, delighted, and crouched down in the mud in her good gray dress and said something to him, and the boy's face lit up like a window. The Duke of Ashbourne sat on his horse in the lane and looked at his wife. He had seen her in 6 months, perhaps 40 times, across a table, in a corridor, standing in his great hall with a water jug at her feet and 12 servants watching. He had a very clear idea of what his wife was: a silence, a grievance, a debt with a face. He had never once seen her laugh. Something went through him then that he did not have a name for and did not want. It sat under his ribs, wrong-shaped and heavy, and it stayed there while the children ran past his horse and out of the gate, and it was still there when Verity straightened up and turned and saw him. She did not curtsy. She stood in the churchyard with a slate in her hand and looked at him, and he found, to his own considerable annoyance, that he was the one who had to think of something to say. "You are teaching," he said. "Yes." "In a public churchyard?" "Yes." "Do you know," said the Duke, "that there is not a house in this county where they are not talking about it?" "I know," said Verity. "You told me to find work. Would you like me to stop?" And that was the moment. That was the exact moment, and she saw it happen. She saw him open his mouth to say yes, and she saw him not say it, and she saw him look away up the lane instead with his jaw set hard. "No," he said. Then he turned the horse and rode up the hill and did not look back, and got home in 20 minutes when it should have taken 40. She walked back that evening in the last of the light, and stopped at the shop to leave the finished work, and Mrs. Braid was standing at the counter with the Bath newspaper spread out flat in front of her. "There you are," the widow said without looking up. "Something in here about that bank of theirs, the one that has its hooks in the hall. My sister writes she'd not sleep easy with her money in there now, with the old man gone." Verity stopped in the doorway. "With him gone?" "Died," said Mrs. Braid. She turned the paper round and put her finger on the column. 6 weeks back, it says, in his own counting house at his desk at 74 years of age. There's the notice. Verity crossed the shop. She had to hold the edge of the counter. The paragraph was 4 lines long. "Died on the 14th September at Queen Square, Bath, Josiah Halloway, Esquire, founder of the banking house of Halloway and Sons. He was in his 75th year. He is survived by no issue. The disposal of his estate, which is considerable, will be read at Bath on the 3rd December. He is survived by no issue." Verity read it 3 times. 6 weeks. He had been dead for 6 weeks. He had died at his desk on the 14th of September, and on the 14th of September she had been in the scullery at Ashbourne Hall washing 91 plates, and on the 15th she had carried her own water up the back stairs, and nobody had told her, and there had been no reason on earth why anybody should. She had spent 3 weeks deciding, with great firmness, that she would never ask that man for anything as long as she lived. She had not once considered that the door might close from the other side first. "My lady," said Mrs. Braid, "you've gone white as the sheet. Sit down, girl." But Verity was already out in the street, walking in the dark up the hill, with her hand pressed flat against her mouth, so that nobody in Ashbourne Cross would hear the sound she was making. The letter Mr. Crail had written on the day the tin box was touched went to Bath, to the offices of Halloway and Sons, addressed to the senior partner. It was a very careful letter. Careful men write careful letters. It said that as steward of the Ashbourne estate he wished to confirm, for his own records, the name of the guarantor upon the marriage settlement of March last, there having been some small confusion in the copying. It was not really a question about a name. It was a man putting his hand on a door to feel whether there was a fire behind it. The reply came back 11 days later, in a clerk's copperplate, over the signature of Mr. Abel Finch. "Sir, in reply to yours of the 4th. This house has no record of any guarantor upon the settlement in question. The sums were advanced directly by the late Mr. Halloway from his private account and were remitted quarterly to the Ashbourne estate through your office, against your own receipt. 3 payments of £1,000 have been made. I enclose copies of the receipts which bear your signature. I am further instructed to inform you that following Mr. Halloway's death the whole of his private accounts must be brought into the general audit before the reading on the 3rd December, and that a representative of this house will attend at Ashbourne to examine the estate books in the last week of November. Mr. Crail read the letter twice. Then he sat quite still in the room with the barred window for about a quarter of an hour, not moving at all, the way a man sits when the ground he has been standing on for 11 years turns out to be a lid. Verity came to see him on the Tuesday, about a roof. She had 6 shillings in a tin and a list in her hand, and she had spent 2 evenings making the list, and she was rather proud of it. Tom Wick's cottage, £11 for slate and labour. The schoolroom window, £2. The bridge on the mill lane, which was down to 1 plank and which 31 children crossed twice a day, £9. £22. She had worked out that if the household money were £55 a month, and if the fires in the east wing stayed unlit, and if she did the mending herself instead of sending it out, there might be a way to find £22 over a winter. She knocked on the steward's door and went in and put the list on his desk. "Mr. Crail," she said, "I should like to talk to you about the estate's expenses." He looked up at her. And Verity, who had spent 6 months in a house where every person was careful around her, saw something in the steward's face that she had never seen there before. He was afraid of her. It only lasted a moment. He got up and smiled and pulled out a chair, and the fear went back down under the dry, soft, ordinary surface of him like a fish under ice. But she had seen it, and she sat down in the chair he offered with her heart going hard and fast, and she thought, "Why?" £22, said Mr. Crail, reading her list, "for tenants' repairs. Over the winter, perhaps in 3 parts. There is no money for tenants' repairs, Your Grace. There has been none for 4 years. I understand that the household receives £55 a month from Bath." "For the household," he said, "not for roofs." "Mr. Crail," said Verity, "a woman died in that cottage in March." He set the list down. He aligned it with the edge of the desk, very precisely, using 2 fingers. "May I ask," he said, "what put it into your head to come and ask me this?" "I walk past the cottage twice a day." "You walk a great deal lately. You walk and you sit in Mrs. Braid's shop, and you sit in Mr. Ellis's schoolroom, and you listen to a great many people." He looked up. "You have been asking about the bank." "I have not asked anyone about the bank." "You have been asking Mrs. Pike about the household money. You opened the tin." Verity said nothing. "There is a thing you should understand about this house," said Mr. Crail. He said it kindly. That was the worst part. He said it in the voice of a man explaining a difficulty to a child he is fond of. "His Grace does not read figures. He never has. He signs what I put in front of him because his father signed what I put in front of him, and because on the day the old Duke died there were 4 men in the hall wanting money, and I was the one who got them out of the house. That is 11 years. Do you know what that is worth, Your Grace? 11 years of a man's trust. I imagine it is worth a great deal." "It is worth everything," said Mr. Crail, "and you have been here 6 months." He came round the desk. He did not touch her. He stood beside the chair and looked down at her and dropped his voice to something almost gentle. "You are going to stop," he said. "You will stop asking, and you will stop counting, and you will stop putting lists on my desk, because if you do not, I will go upstairs and I will tell His Grace that his wife has been going through the estate accounts behind his back, and he will believe me. He has believed me for 11 years, and he has not believed you for 1 single day since the hour he married you." He straightened up. Now, was there anything else? Verity stood. She was 22 years old and her hands were shaking, and she made herself take one breath before she spoke, because her mother had taught her that a shaking voice loses an argument no matter what it says. "Mr. Crale," she said, "you did not ask me why I wanted the money." "I beg your pardon." "You did not ask what the 22 pounds was for. You did not ask whether I understood the accounts, or where I had learned to read a ledger, or whether I was making trouble out of ignorance." She picked up her list off his desk. "You went straight to the tin box, straight to it in one step before I had said the word money aloud." The room was very quiet. "A man only does that," said Verity, "if he already knows what is in the tin." She got as far as the door. "Your grandfather is dead," said Mr. Crale. Verity stopped with her hand on the latch. The whole world got very small and very loud. "I am sorry to be the one to tell you," he said behind her in that same soft voice. "It was in the Bath paper, September. I have known who you are since the day the settlement papers came into this house, Your Grace, and I have never said one word of it to a living soul, and neither have you." A pause. "Which is interesting, is it not, that neither of us has said it?" Verity did not turn around. She could not. "You will want to think about how that looks," said Mr. Crale. "A girl comes into a ruined house as a bride. She never tells her husband that the bank breaking him belongs to her own family. She says nothing for 6 months while he sinks. And then the old man dies, and a fortnight later she is suddenly very interested in the estate accounts." He let it sit there. "I have a great deal of respect for you, Your Grace. I did not think you had it in you. But it does look extremely bad, and you will find that a steward's word and a duke's temper are quite enough to hang it round your neck." "That is not what happened." "No," Mr. Crale agreed pleasantly, "but it is what it looks like, and I have found over 11 years that what a thing looks like is very nearly always stronger than what it is." She walked out into the yard and stood by the pump and put both hands on the cold iron of it. 3,000 pounds. She did not know that number yet. She would not know it for another 5 weeks, but she knew now, standing in that yard with her heart slamming, that the money had not simply failed to come. Something had happened to it. Money does not fail to arrive from a bank. Banks are the one thing in England that do not forget. And she knew something worse. She could not tell her husband. Not now. Not any of it, not the coin, not the name, not the tin, not one word, because the moment she opened her mouth, Crale's version was waiting, already built, already better than hers. She knew all along. She watched you drown and said nothing. It was true, too. That was the unbearable part. She had said nothing. She had said nothing out of shame, and shame is impossible to explain to a man who has already decided you are a liar. Verity stood in the yard until her hands were numb. Then she went in and got her basket and walked the 3 miles down to the village to finish a set of 6 pillow slips, because there was nothing else in the world that she could do that would make anything better, and at least the pillow slips would be finished. Mr. Crale did not go upstairs that day. He was not a hasty man. He waited 9 days. He waited until the Friday, when he brought the quarter accounts up to the library for signature, and stood at the Duke's elbow while he signed them, and gathered the papers, and got as far as the door. Then he stopped and turned and said, in the voice of a man who has been arguing with himself for a week and has just lost, "Your Grace, may I say something that is not my place?" The Duke did not look up. "You will anyway." "It concerns her Grace." Now he looked up. "She walks down to the village 6 days in the week," said Mr. Crale. "She is at the shop until 4, and after that she is at the schoolhouse, and she does not start back up the hill until dark. That is 2 hours, 4 days a week, in a schoolroom with the door shut and no other soul in the building but Mr. Ellis." He paused exactly long enough. "He is 26 years old, sir. He is unmarried. The clock on the library mantelpiece ticked 11 times. Go on, said the Duke of Ashbourne. The blacksmith walks her home on Fridays. The blacksmith. I say nothing against her, I would not. Mr. Crail looked at the carpet. But she is a young woman who has been badly used in this house. Forgive me, sir, but she has, and everyone in the county knows it, and she is out of it 6 days a week, and she has begun to look happy. That is all. She has begun to look very happy indeed, and she does not look happy here. He waited. He was a careful man, and he had spent 11 years learning exactly where this particular man was thin. Shall I have the carriage brought round on Fridays, sir, he said, so that she need not walk? And the Duke of Ashbourne, who had sat on a horse in a lane 6 weeks ago, and watched his wife laugh in a churchyard, and had not had a name for what went through him then, said, No, leave it. But his hand had closed around the pen, and it stayed closed, and Mr. Crail went out and shut the door very quietly behind him and allowed himself, halfway down the stairs, a small and private smile. The rain began on the 8th of November, and did not stop for 4 days. On the 3rd night the Mill Lane Bridge went. Verity heard about it at 6:30 in the evening, in Mrs. Braid's back room, when a boy came in soaked to the bone, saying that the water was over the lane, and Sally Wicks too were on the wrong side of it, and their grandfather could not get across. She was out of the shop before Mrs. Braid could reach for her shawl. The lane was a river. The plank was gone, she could see where it had been, a raw white scar on the bank where the post had torn out. On the far side, up on the rise where the ground was still dry, 2 small figures stood holding each other's hands, and old Tom Wick was in the water to his thighs 20 feet downstream, trying to work his way across and not managing it, because he was 68 and the current was taking his feet. Verity got hold of the gatepost and shouted at him to go back. He could not hear her. Nobody could hear anything over the water. She was pulling off her shawl and looking for the shallow place when a horse came down the lane behind her at a speed no sane man would use in that weather, and the Duke of Ashbourne came off it before it had stopped. Don't, he said. There are children. I know, don't. He had a coil of rope off his saddle, and he was already tying it round the gatepost. He did it fast and badly, and she saw his hands were shaking. She took the end out of his hands and did it again properly, the way a saddler's neighbor learns to do things, and he watched her do it and did not say a word. Then he went into the water. It took him 4 minutes to cross 40 feet. She stood on the bank holding the rope slack with both arms braced round the post, and she watched her husband go down twice and come back up twice, and she found that she was praying out loud in a flat, furious voice, and that most of it was not really praying. He got Tom Wick to the bank first. Then he went back for the children, one under each arm, and he came out of that water gray-faced and could not stand up, and sat down hard in the mud of the lane with the 2 of them still clinging on, and did not let go of either. Verity got down in the mud beside him and put her shawl round the smaller child and heard herself say, "You fool." The Duke of Ashbourne looked at her. And he laughed, once cracked half a breath, the shocked laugh of a man who has not laughed in a very long time. £9, he said. What? The bridge. He wiped the rain off his face with the back of his hand, and it did no good at all. Crail gave me your list, not to act on it, to show me what you were doing. He was still holding the children. £9. I have not had £9 of my own since I was 24 years old, and I did not want to look at a piece of paper that told me a bridge was going to kill somebody, so I put it in a drawer. Verity did not say anything. Say it, he said. No. Say it, you have earned it. I am not going to say it, said Verity, because there are 2 children here and they are cold and you are bleeding, and it can be said perfectly well tomorrow. They put the Wicks in the Hall's own dry rooms that night, which had not happened in living memory, and Mrs. Pike lit fires in 3 grates without asking anybody's permission, and dared the world to comment. At 11 o'clock, Verity came down for hot water and found the Duke in the kitchen, alone in a dry shirt, with his hand wrapped badly in a cloth. She looked at the wrapping. Then she got the basin and the brandy and sat down opposite him and held out her hand for his without saying anything, and after a moment he gave it to her. It was a long tear across the palm from the rope. "This will hurt," she said. "Yes." She cleaned it. He did not make a sound. The kitchen ticked and settled around them, and somewhere upstairs a child was crying and being hushed. "Where did you learn that knot?" he said. "Bath, we lived over a saddler's." "We, my mother and I." "And your father?" "He died when I was 6. He was a schoolmaster." She turned his hand to get at the deep part. "He taught Latin to the sons of men who did not pay him, and he died of a fever he caught from one of them, and my mother sewed for 11 years so that I could have shoes." The Duke was quiet for a moment. "Your uncle," he said, "the one in Bath, the one with the 12,000 pounds. Verity's hands went still on the bandage. "I have never met my uncle," she said. "What?" "I have never met him. I have never met any of them." She started winding again, carefully, not looking up. "My mother married beneath her and her family cut her off, and she wrote to them for 19 years and they never wrote back. When she died there was nothing left, and a solicitor came to the lodging house and told me that a settlement had been made and that I was to be married in March. That is all I know. I signed what he put in front of me because I was 22 years old and I had £4 and nowhere to go." She tied the end off. "You have been telling me for 6 months that my family cheated you. Your Grace, I do not have a family. I have a name and a mending basket, and I have never in my life seen 1 shilling of that money." He looked at her across the kitchen table for a long time. "I called you a liar," he said, "in my own hall, in front of the girls from the scullery." "Yes." "I put a coin in your hand." "Yes," said Verity. And she thought for one whole second, she genuinely thought, tell him now. Tell him about the coin and the tin and Crail and the name. He would believe you now. She opened her mouth. And what came out was, "Your hand will want looking at again tomorrow." Because she was 22 and frightened, and because there is a particular kind of cowardice that comes over people at exactly the moment they are being forgiven, when the thing they have to say might undo it. That second was the most expensive second of her life. 2 days later, 11 cartloads of slate came up the Bath Road. The Duke of Ashbourne had sold his father's hunters, 4 horses, the last good thing the estate had that was truly his, and he had done it without telling anyone, and the money went on slate for the Wick Cottage and 8 others, on £9 of timber for the Mill Lane Bridge, and on glass for the schoolroom window. He did not tell Verity. She found out from the blacksmith. She walked into the library that evening and stood in the doorway, and he looked up from a ledger he did not understand, and neither of them said anything for a moment. "It was your list," he said. "It was your horses." "They were eating and doing nothing," said the Duke, "which is a fair description of me, and I could only sell one of us." Verity laughed. He looked at her when she did it. He looked at her the way a man looks at a fire in a room that has been cold for 11 days. "Verity," he said. It was the first time he had ever used her name. And that was as far as it got, that, and one step towards each other across a library carpet, and her hand almost on the back of a chair, and his almost on hers. Because at that exact moment, on the floor above, Mr. Crail was standing in the middle of the Duchess of Ashbourne's bedroom with a candle in his hand. He was not hurried, he never was. He put the ducal seal, the heavy silver matrix that stamped every deed and lease on the estate, and which lived in a locked drawer in his own office, into the bottom of her wardrobe, under her second-best shoes. He put £50 in banknotes, taken that morning from the household tin, inside her mending basket, folded flat beneath the lining. And on her writing table, half tucked under the blotter so that it would look hidden but not too well hidden, he left a letter. It was in a small, neat, sloping hand that was not quite hers, but was near enough that nobody who was angry would look twice. It was not finished. Unfinished letters are always more convincing than finished ones. To A. Finch, Esquire, Halloway & Sons, Queen Askew, Bath. Sir, I have now the seal and can send you what you require by the week's end. You may tell the gentleman that the estate is worth far less than the books show, and that when the audit comes at the month's end, there will be no. He set the candle down and looked at his arrangement the way a man looks at a table he has laid. He had 8 days until the bank's representative arrived at Ashbourne to open the estate books. 8 days to have the Duchess out of the house, disgraced, in a place where nobody would think to ask her surname. Then he went down to the library and knocked, and said that he was very sorry to disturb his grace, but that £50 was missing from the household money, and that Mrs. Pike was in a dreadful state about it, and that he thought it best the house be searched. All of it, he said, every room including his own. Especially his own. They found the notes in the mending basket at 9:20. They found the seal under her shoes at 25 past. And at 9:30 on the 18th of November, the Duke of Ashbourne came down the great staircase into the black and white hall with an unfinished letter in his hand, and every servant in that house was standing along the wall, because Mr. Crail had thought it best that the search be conducted openly, in front of everyone, so that no one should be under any suspicion. 12 of them, the same 12. Verity stood in the middle of the floor, in the same place she had stood in June. "Tell me this is not your hand," said the Duke. And she looked at the letter, at the name Halloway written out plain across the top of it in ink, and she understood with a clarity that went through her like cold water that she was about to have to say the truest sentence of her life. "That is my grandfather's bank, and I have known it since June, and I never told you. And that there was not one single person in that room who would believe the rest of it." "It is not my hand," she said. "Then whose?" The scullery girls were crying. Mrs. Pike had her fist against her mouth. "Your Grace," said Verity, "please send them out. Please, send them out and I will tell you everything, and I am asking you," her voice went, and she took it back and finished, "I am asking you not to do this to me twice in the same room." For a moment, one moment, and she saw it, the Duke of Ashbourne wavered. Then Mr. Crail said, quietly from the foot of the stairs, "Sir, the seal was under her shoes." And the Duke's hand closed around the letter until the paper tore. "Get out of my house," he said. She went out of the front door of Ashbourne Hall at 10 o'clock at night on the 18th of November with a shawl, a mending basket she was not allowed to keep, and nothing else. They took the basket at the door. Mr. Crail said regretfully that it was estate property. It was raining. Of course it was raining. She got as far as the second gate before her legs stopped working properly, and she sat down on the wet stone of the mounting block and stayed there for some time, and then she got up and walked 3 miles down the hill because there was nowhere else in England to walk to. She slept in the church porch at Ashbourne Cross. Mrs. Braid found her there at 6 in the morning, took one look, said nothing at all, and brought her inside and put her in the bed in the back room and sat on the end of it until she stopped shaking. The village did not believe it for one single minute. That was the thing that Mr. Crail, for all his 11 careful years, had not thought about. He had lived at Ashbourne Hall since he was 39, and he had spoken to perhaps 6 people in the village in all that time, and he did not know what she had been doing down there. Sarah Braid knew. Sarah Braid had watched a Duchess hem sheets at 11 stitches to the inch for 2 shillings a week and had never once heard her complain. The blacksmith knew. He had walked her home on Fridays because the road was dark. Tom Wick knew, and his 2 grandchildren knew, and Mr. Ellis knew, and 31 children knew who called her Miss. And by noon on the 19th of November there were 40 people standing in the rain outside Mrs. Braid's shop, and by 2 o'clock there was a paper going round with 106 names on it, and 11 of them were crosses, because 11 of the people who signed it could not write. They took it up to the hall. The Duke of Ashbourne did not see them. Mr. Crail received the paper at the door and said that His Grace was not at home, and read it, and folded it, and put it in his pocket. Then he went into his office and shut the door, and stood for a while with his hands flat on the desk. He had 6 days. He rode to the magistrate that same afternoon. Sir Bertram Hale was 71, deaf in one ear, and had been a friend of the old Duke's. He did not like new things, and he did not like being disturbed at his dinner, and he liked steward's business least of all. But theft of £50 in banknotes and theft of a ducal seal, sworn to on information by a steward of 11 years' standing, with a letter in evidence and 2 witnesses to the search, that was not steward's business. That was felony. £50, said Sir Bertram. That's a hanging figure, Crail. Nobody wishes for hanging, Sir Bertram. They never do, then it's transportation. He wrote slowly with a bad pen. 14 years. She'll be 40 when she sees England again, and she won't. He looked up. Does Ashbourne know you've come to me? Mr. Crail, who had told the Duke that the matter would be handled privately and quietly and within the house, said, His Grace wishes the law to take its course. They came for her at Mrs. Braid's shop at 8 o'clock on the morning of the 20th. The blacksmith stood in the doorway and would not move, and it took 3 men to move him. Mrs. Braid hit a constable with a yardstick. Mr. Ellis went down to the assize town on foot, 12 miles, to swear to her character, and was told at the door by a clerk that the word of a village schoolmaster on £22 a year was not evidence of anything, and to go home. Verity was taken to the county jail at Wells and put in a stone room 8 feet by 6 with a high barred window, and the door was shut, and the bolt went across. She had one thing in the world. She had a silver token wrapped in a handkerchief, because it had been in the toe of her second-best shoe, and when Mr. Crail had lifted those shoes to put the seal underneath them, he had not thought to look inside. At Ashbourne Hall, the Duke of Ashbourne had not spoken to anybody in 2 days. He sat in the library with the fire out and the ledgers he could not read stacked in front of him, and he thought, over and over, in a loop that would not break. £9. I have not had £9 of my own since I was 24. I did not want to look at a piece of paper that told me a bridge was going to kill somebody, so I put it in a drawer. You fool. He had said her name once in that room 4 days ago. Mr. Crail came in on the evening of the 22nd with a decanter and a proposal. Sir, he said, there is the audit. Let them come. They will come on the 28th, and they will find the estate cannot meet the quarter, and Halloway's will call in the whole. That is 900 acres, the timber, the home farm, and this house. He set the glass down at the Duke's elbow. There are 211 people on this land, sir. The Wicks, the Braids, the school. The Duke said nothing. Lady Amelia Vance, said Mr. Crail, is at Farley until Christmas. No. Her husband left her £80,000 and no children, and she has asked after you twice this year, and she is a handsome woman of 34 with a great deal of sense. Mr. Crail let that sit. And your Grace's marriage, forgive me, is over in every way but the paper. There are grounds now. Felony. There is not a court in England that would not grant it. Get out. I will get out, said Mr. Crail, and I will come back on Thursday, and you will still have 211 people and no money, and I will still be the only man in this house who is trying to save them." He went to the door. "She stood in that hall," said the Duke to the dead fire, "and asked me to send the servants out, and I did not." "Sir," said Mr. Crail gently, "you were deceived. It is not a crime to be deceived. It is only a crime to go on being deceived after you have seen the evidence." He shut the door. Lady Amelia Vance came to Ashbourne Hall on the 25th of November, with 2 carriages, a maid, and a great many opinions about the state of the drawing-room. She was not a wicked woman. That was almost the worst of it. She was brisk and clever, and she looked at the accounts on the second morning and understood them in 20 minutes, which was 19 minutes faster than the Duke ever had. She said the West Farm should never have been let go. She said the household was being robbed and had been for years, and she said it lightly over breakfast, the way one says a thing that is obvious, and Mr. Crail poured the coffee and did not spill a drop. On the 26th of November, the Duke of Ashbourne asked her to marry him when the courts had done their work, and she accepted him, and neither of them pretended it was anything other than what it was. That night he went up to the east wing, to a room with no fire in it, and stood in the doorway for a long while. There was nothing in it, they had cleared it. A bed, a wardrobe, a writing table, a cold grate. He went to the wardrobe and opened it, and there was nothing there but a pair of shoes with the heels worn down on the outside edges, from walking 3 miles down a hill and 3 miles back up it, 6 days in the week, for 11 weeks. The Duke of Ashbourne sat down on the floor of that room with his wife's shoes in his hands, and stayed there until the light came. The jail at Wells was very cold and very loud. There were 41 women in that yard, and Verity was the only one who had come in wearing good gray wool, which lasted about 4 hours before somebody took the shawl off her back, and after that she was the same as the rest. She learned things there too. She learned that a woman called Bet had been taken for a loaf of bread and had a child of 2 at home. She learned that the assize would sit in January and that nobody was tried before then. She learned that of the last 11 women transported out of that county, 2 had come back. She did not cry. She had done all of that in the church porch, and there did not seem to be any more of it. She sat with her back against the stone, and she took the token out of the handkerchief and turned it over and over in her fingers. And she looked at the heavy brow and the blunt nose and the jaw like a shovel. And she said, in her head, to a dead man she had met once in the rain when she was 10 years old, "Well, here we both are." On the 1st of December, the turnkey came and said there was a woman to see her. Mrs. Pike had traveled 12 miles on the outside of a carrier's cart in December, at 61 years of age, and had paid the turnkey 4 shillings of her own money, and she stood in that stone room with her bonnet dripping and her hands full. "Now you listen to me," she said, before Verity could say anything at all. "I have been at that house 46 years. 46. I was 15. And there is not one soul alive who knows the back of it better than me, and I know that the seal lives in a locked drawer in that man's office and has done since the old Duke died, and I know that no woman on this earth walks up 3 flights to steal a thing and leaves it under her own shoes." Mrs. Pike. "So I went in there," said Mrs. Pike. "Sunday night. He was at church, which he never misses, and I do not care what happens to me now, and I took the poker to his cupboard." She put a bundle down on the stone bench. It was tied with tape, and it was thick, and it smelled of a closed drawer. "There is a box in there," she said. "Japanned, like the household tin, but smaller, and it does not open. And in the bottom of it, under the ledgers, was this. And I could not read all of it because my eyes are not what they were, but I could read who they are for." Verity picked up the bundle. 7 letters. 7 letters still sealed. Not one of them opened. The wax was dark red, and each seal was the same, a fat blunt oval with the letters JH pressed into it, and every one of the 7 was addressed in the same hand. An old man's hand, heavy, slow, pressing too hard, the sort of writing done by someone who learned it late and never quite forgave it. Her Grace the Duchess of Ashbourne, Ashbourne Hall, by hand, private. The dates went from the 12th of April to the 12th of September. The 12th of September was 2 days before he died. Verity sat down on the floor of a cell in the county jail at Wells with 7 letters in her lap and Mrs. Pike's hand on her shoulder, and she broke the first seal with her thumb, and it cracked like a small bone. The letter inside was 1 page. The writing filled all of it and ran up the margin at the end, the way it does when a person has more to say than they planned. "My dear girl," it began, "you will not know me, and you will have been told a great many things about me, and most of them will be true. I am writing to you because I am 74 years old and I have already wasted 19 years being right about your mother, and I do not have another 19. I have looked for you since the summer of 1810. It took me 4 years, and I will tell you why it took so long, and I am not proud of it. I know what house you are in. I know exactly what house you are in better than you do, my dear, and I am sorrier about that than I can put on paper, because I am the one who put you there." She read the second letter that night, by the light that came through the bars from the yard lamp, holding the page up at an angle to catch it. "You will want to know about your mother's letters," it said. "I will not make it easier than it is. I got every one, 19 years of them. I read every one on the day it came, and I put every one in a box, and I never answered a single one, and there is no reason for it that I can give you that is not simply pride. She married a man with £40 a year, and I had told her what would happen, and I was determined to be right about it, and I was right about it, and being right about it cost me my only child. In April of 1810, she wrote to me for the first time asking for money, not for herself, for a doctor for her chest, and for her girl's shoes. I put that letter in the box with the others for 11 days, because I was 70 years old and still a stubborn man, and on the 12th day I got up in the night and dressed and went down to the counting house and made out a draft for £400 and sent it by the morning coach. She had been dead 9 days. They had already given up the rooms. Nobody knew where the girl had gone. I have spent every year since then looking for you, and I want you to understand that I am not writing to you now out of kindness. I am writing out of the other thing, whatever the other thing is called." Verity sat on the floor of that cell with the page against her chest and cried for the first time in 11 days, not for herself, and not really for him, but for a woman in 2 rooms above a saddler's shop who had gone to her grave, believing that 19 years of letters had never been read. She had 4 letters left, and half of the 3rd, when the turnkey put his head in at 7 the next morning and said she was wanted at the Sessions House. She folded them into her sleeve. Mr. Crail discovered the forced cupboard on the morning of the 28th of November, an hour before the banksman was due. He stood looking at the splintered wood for perhaps 20 seconds. Then he went and found Mrs. Pike in the still room and dismissed her without a character, and told her to be off the estate by noon. 46 years. She had come to that house at 15 years old in the reign of a different king. She did not go to her room to pack. She went up the front stairs, which she had not used in 46 years, and walked into the library without knocking. "Your Grace," said Mrs. Pike, "I am dismissed, so you will hear this out, and then I will go." The Duke of Ashbourne looked up. "That girl came into this house in March with 3 gowns, and one of them mended," she said. "She carried her own water up the back stairs from the first week because she would not have Annie do it twice. She washed plates in my scullery. She never once, not once, sir, and I would swear it on my mother, said one word against you to any living soul in that house, and there was not a servant here who did not give her a dozen chances to." "Mrs. Pike," I have not finished. You will let me finish, because I am 61 and turned off at noon, and I shall not get another chance in this life." He did not speak again. "Mr. Crail keeps the seal in a locked drawer and has done since your father died. Your wife has never had a key to any room in this house but her own, and it does not lock." Mrs. Pike's chin was shaking and her voice was not. "And there is a black box in that man's cupboard that has no business being there, and I went in on Sunday and took a poker to it. And that is what I am dismissed for, and not for anything else, and you may ask him yourself if you have the stomach." She got to the door. "She hemmed sheets for 2 shillings a week because you told her to," she said. "And she never let one child in that village hear her say a bad word about you. You go and ask them. Go and ask them what she said about you." The library door closed. The Duke of Ashbourne sat for a count of about 10. Then he got up and went down the back stairs 2 at a time, and put his boot through the panel of Mr. Crail's office door. The Japan box came open on the 4th blow with the poker. There were 2 ledgers in it. The first was the estate book he had been signing for 11 years. The second was the same, in the same hand, with different figures, and the difference was not small, and it was not clever, and once he was looking at it, the Duke of Ashbourne, who did not read figures, could read it perfectly well. Under the ledgers were 3 receipts. Received of Halloway and Sons, Bath, on account of the marriage settlement of Her Grace the Duchess of Ashbourne, the sum of £1,000, dated the 25th of March. Signed, J. Crail, Steward. The same for June. The same for September. The Duke sat down on the floor of the steward's office, among the splinters of the door. £3,000. It had come. It had come on time every quarter into this house, and had gone into a man's pocket, and while it was going into a man's pocket, he had stood in his own great hall in front of 12 servants and called his wife a thief and a fraud and put a shilling in her hand and told her to go and find work. She had said, "I have never seen 1 shilling of that money." And it had been true. Every word of it had been true, and there was a receipt in his hand proving it, and she had never known there was anything to prove. He was very quiet for a long time. Then he did the first genuinely intelligent thing he had done in 11 years. He put the ledgers and the receipts inside his coat, walked upstairs, and said nothing whatsoever to Mr. Crail. He said nothing at dinner. He said nothing when the bank's man was announced and the steward met him at the door and explained smoothly that His Grace was indisposed and the books were not in a state to be shown. He said nothing all the next day. He let the man go on pouring the coffee. He told Lady Amelia Vance on the evening of the 1st of December, in the drawing-room, standing up, because he did not think he had the right to sit down. He told her all of it, the haul in June, the coin, the list in the drawer, the bridge, the search, the seal under the shoes, the 3 receipts in his coat. And then he told her what he intended to do about it, which was to go into the Sessions House at Wells the following morning and say every word of it aloud, in front of a magistrate, a clerk, and whoever else happened to be in the room. Lady Amelia was quiet for a moment. "You understand what that costs you," she said. "Yes." "Oh, I do not think you do, so I shall say it plainly because you are not good with figures and I am." She counted it off. "You will stand up in a public court and say that your steward has robbed you for 11 years and that you never noticed. Every man who holds a note of yours will hear it by Friday. Halloway's will call in the whole of it inside a month, because no bank on earth lends to a house that cannot count. You will lose the land, the timber, and this house. You will be the joke of 3 counties. And you will still be married to a woman who has every reason on God's earth never to speak to you again. So you cannot even do it in the hope of being forgiven." "Yes," said the Duke of Ashbourne, "that is a fair account." "And if you say nothing," said Amelia, "she goes to New South Wales in January and you marry me in the spring, and the tenants keep their roofs, and in 5 years nobody remembers her name. Yes. So I am going to Wells in the morning, he said. Amelia Vance looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up and rang the bell and told the footman to have her carriages ready at 7, and turned back with her hands folded. I'm not going to marry you, she said, but I shall tell you something, Ashbourne, because I am 34 years old and I was married once to a man who would not have done this for anybody. She picked up her gloves. 3 weeks ago you were a man I was prepared to buy. This morning you were not worth £80,000 to me. Tonight I find I would have taken you for nothing, and it is a great pity, because you are quite obviously in love with your wife. She was gone by 7:30. She left on the hall table the name and direction of her own attorney and a note that said only, "He is expensive and he is worth it. The bill comes to me. A.V." The Sessions House at Wells was full on the 2nd of December, because the whole county had heard about the Duchess of Ashbourne by then, and because Mrs. Braid had hired a wagon and brought 11 people from the village in it. Verity was brought up from below in the same gray wool she had been arrested in, 11 days dirtier. She had 4 letters and a half in her sleeve and a silver token in her closed hand. She saw her husband standing at the front and did not know what it meant. Sir Bertram Hale opened the business and asked whether the prosecutor was present, and the Duke of Ashbourne said that he was. "Then let us get on," said Sir Bertram. "You say she took £50 and the seal?" "No, sir." The clerk stopped writing. "I say that my steward, Josiah Crail, took £50 from the household money and the seal from his own locked drawer, and put them in my wife's room, and wrote a letter in a hand not hers, and swore an information before you on the 20th of November which he knew to be false." The Duke's voice was perfectly level and carried to the back of the room. "And I say that he has robbed the Ashbourne estate for 11 years, and that I signed everything he put in front of me and never once read it, and that the whole of it happened because I am an idle and incurious man who did not choose to know what was being done in his own house." There was a noise in the room like a wave going out. "Have you anything beyond your word?" said Sir Bertram. "I have his second ledger in his hand, and I have 3 receipts signed by him for £3,000 paid over by Halloway's Bank to this estate on account of my wife's marriage settlement. Money my wife was accused before her own servants of never having brought me, and money she never saw, and money I have called her a liar over since March." He laid them on the table. "I would like the whole of it read out, sir, aloud, all 3. "Ashbourne," said Sir Bertram more quietly, "you know what this does to your credit?" "Yes." "There is no undoing it once it is said in this room." "Sir Bertram," said the Duke of Ashbourne, "I put a shilling in that woman's hand in front of 12 servants and told her to go and find work. She went and found it. She hemmed sheets in a village shop for 2 shillings a week and taught 31 children their letters for nothing and never said one word against me, and I threw her out of my house in the rain on a letter a thief wrote." He looked up. "Read it aloud, sir. She was accused out loud. She will be cleared out loud or it is worth nothing." They read all 3 receipts. It took 4 minutes, and it was the longest 4 minutes of his life. The charge was dismissed at 11 minutes past 10. A warrant was sworn for Josiah Crail before 11, and he was taken at Ashbourne Hall at 4 that afternoon, in his office, packing, with £240 sewn into a coat lining. Verity came out of the Sessions House into the cold white light of the 2nd of December, and stood at the top of the steps, and there were about 60 people in the yard, and 11 of them were from a village 3 miles down a hill, and Mrs. Braid was crying and pretending she was not. Her husband came out behind her and stopped a good 6 feet away. "I'm not going to ask you for anything," he said. "I have nothing to ask with. I want you to know that the whole of it is said and cannot be taken back, and that there is a room at Mrs. Braid's and money for it, and Lady Amelia's attorney is engaged and paid for, and none of it puts you under any obligation to me of any kind whatsoever." Verity looked at him. He was thinner. His hand was still bandaged badly by somebody who was not her. "You sold your father's horses for a bridge," she said. "Yes. And you have just sold everything else for 4 minutes of reading out loud." "Yes." "Why?" The Duke of Ashbourne opened his mouth, and then did not say the thing he was going to say, and said instead, simply, "Because it was true, and you were owed it, and there was nobody else left to say it." Verity stood on the steps of the Sessions House with 4 unopened letters in her sleeve and did not answer him. She could not. There was too much in the way, 11 days of stone floor, and a hall with 12 servants in it, and a second in a kitchen when she should have spoken and had not. She was still standing there when a carriage came into the yard. An elderly gentleman got down from it. He was small and neat and very tired-looking, in a black coat and a gray stock, and he had a leather case under his arm, and the look of a man who had been in 3 counties in 5 days. He came up the steps and stopped in front of her and took off his hat. "Forgive me," he said. "I was at Ashbourne Hall on Wednesday and they would not admit me, and I have been to Bath and back since, and I am not certain I have the right person, so I must ask it plainly." He hesitated. "Am I addressing Verity Ann Halloway, daughter of Margaret Halloway of Bath?" Behind her she heard her husband say, very quietly, "What?" "My name is Abel Finch," said the old man. "I am senior partner of Halloway and Sons. Madam, we have been looking for you for 12 years, and the will is read tomorrow morning, and I have a coach outside." The coach went through the night to Bath. Mr. Finch had brought a second one because the Duke of Ashbourne had been summoned too, not as a husband, and not as a guest, but as the principal debtor of the estate of Josiah Halloway, whose obligations were to be read out and settled in the morning. He was required to attend. It was on a printed form. So they traveled 12 hours in separate carriages, 4 lengths apart, and did not speak, and Verity read the rest of her letters by the light of a swinging lamp. The third told her he had found her in April of 1814, through a saddler in Bath, who remembered the schoolmaster's widow upstairs. The fourth told her that when he learned what house she was in, he had gone through Ashbourne's paper the way he went through everything, and had bought up the whole of it quietly over 11 weeks, every note, every mortgage, the timber, the West Farms, all of it, and that he had done it in the first instance so that if the young man turned out to be a brute, he could break him in an afternoon. The fifth said that he had been ill in June and had not been able to travel. The sixth said that he had been ill again in July, and that he was writing to her every month regardless because it did not signify whether she was answering. He had learned that much about letters at last. The seventh was dated the 12th of September, and it was not sealed with wax like the others. It was sewn at the fold with black thread, and across the front, in that heavy pressing hand, it said, "Not to be opened by her, to be read aloud by Finch at the reading, in the hearing of whoever is in the room." Verity turned it over twice, and did not open it, and held it in both hands for the last 40 miles. The counting house of Halloway and Sons stood on the north side of Queen Square, 3 stories of dark stone, with a green door and a brass plate worn nearly smooth. The room upstairs had a long table in it. There were 11 people around that table by 10 o'clock, clerks, 2 attorneys, a physician who had attended the old man, and at the far end, a stout gentleman of about 50 in a very good coat, who had arrived at 9:30 and had already asked twice how long the business was expected to take. His name was Wilfred Halloway. He was Josiah's brother's son, junior partner of the house, and for 11 years the man who opened the private correspondence. He got to his feet when Verity came in and looked at her, and his face did something complicated. "Good God," he said, "they found you." "Mr. Halloway," said Verity, "I have written to you 4 times since March." "Have you? There is a great deal of post." "I asked you where the marriage settlement was. I asked you whether there was any family at all who would speak to me. I asked you, in September, whether you knew of anyone in Bath called Halloway who might be a relation of my mother's." She sat down. "You had a black-edged card on your hall table when the second of those letters arrived. My grandfather had been dead a fortnight. Now look here. You put a notice in the Bath paper," said Verity. "That said he is survived by no issue." The room had gone extremely quiet. "I want to understand it, that is all," she said, "because I have thought about you for 3 days in a stone room and I cannot make it come out to anything but the simple thing." She looked at him. "Was it just the money?" Wilfred Halloway sat down and did not answer, and in a way that was the answer, and Mr. Abel Finch, who had worked in that house for 40 years and had wondered about a number of things for the last 5 of them, made a small note on the paper in front of him. The Duke of Ashbourne stood by the door with his hat in his hands, and did not sit down at all. The will itself took 9 minutes and was very plain, because Josiah Halloway had drafted it himself and did not care for lawyers' language. The whole of his private fortune, £140,000 in the funds, the house at Queen Square, and his 4/5 share of the banking house of Halloway and Sons, went to my granddaughter, Verity Ann, only child of my only child Margaret, absolutely and without condition. To Wilfred Halloway, his salary, his 1/5 share, and a sentence that the clerk read out in a completely flat voice, and which was, in the opinion of everyone present, the worst thing in the document. To my nephew Wilfred I leave the business, which he understands, and nothing else, which he will understand also. And then at the end the schedule, 4 pages of it, every note, bond, mortgage, and encumbrance held by Josiah Halloway in his private capacity, and 3 of those 4 pages were Ashbourne. 900 acres, the timber on the North Ridge, the home farm, the West Farms, the hall itself, £61,000 of debt at 4.5%, every penny of it now the property of the woman sitting at the end of the table in a grey wool dress with 11 days of jail still on it. Somebody at the table made a small involuntary noise. The Duke of Ashbourne, by the door, closed his eyes for a moment, and then opened them again and went on standing. "There is a further paper," said Mr. Finch. "I am instructed to read it aloud." He cut the black thread with a penknife. "To be read at the reading, in the hearing of whoever is in the room, and I am sorry for it, because a good deal of this is not fit for company. But I have found that things said in private can be denied afterwards, and things said in front of 11 people cannot, and I would rather be embarrassed than misunderstood. My name is Josiah Halloway. I began as a clerk's son with no shoes, and I have made £140,000, and I have been told all my life that this makes me a man worth listening to, and it does not. I have been wrong about the only thing that mattered for 19 years. My daughter Margaret married a schoolmaster with £40 a year. I told her she would starve. She did not starve. She sewed and she was happy, and she wrote to me every year to tell me so, and I read every letter and answered none of them, because I had said she would starve and she had not, and I would rather have been right than have been her father. She died on the 9th of April, 1810, of a disease that £400 would have treated. I sent the £400. It arrived 9 days late. I have that draft still. In April 1814 I found her girl. She had been married 5 weeks by then, to Julian, Duke of Ashbourne, by a settlement drawn up in this house, and I want it written down plainly that I arranged that marriage. Nobody else did. My nephew executed it and did not ask questions, and my granddaughter signed it because she was 22 and had £4 in the world. I bought up the whole of the Ashbourne debt before I did it, all of it, so that if the man was a brute, I could put him in the street inside a month and take her out of there. Now I must set down why I did not simply take her out of there to begin with, because a reasonable man would have. I did it because I did not trust myself to judge him. I have judged one marriage in my life. I judged it on £40 a year, and I was wrong, and my daughter died in 2 rooms over a saddler's shop being right about me. So I said to myself, this time, old man, you will not judge. You will find out. You will put the girl into that house with nothing, no name, no money, no friends, no grandfather, and you will watch what a man does with a woman he believes is worth nothing to him. Because that is the only honest way to learn what is in a man, and there is no other, and I did not know how else to do it. I know exactly what that makes me. I have used my own granddaughter as a weight on a scale. There is no version of this in which I am a good man, and I am not going to write one. But I want the following understood, and it is the reason I am putting it in the will rather than saying it kindly in a letter. I meant to be there. I meant to come in the spring, and I was ill, and in the summer, and I was ill again. And I have been writing to her every month so that when I did come, she would know who I was. It has not gone as I planned. If this is being read out, then I have run out of time, and she has been in that house on her own for longer than I ever intended, and whatever she has suffered there is mine and not hers, and I ask her pardon for it, and I have no right to expect it. As to the Duke of Ashbourne, every note against that estate is now hers, and she may call in the whole of it on a morning's notice, and no court in England could stop her. I have thought a long time about whether to instruct her. I shall not instruct her. I had no right to judge her mother, and I have no right to judge him either, and I have learned late, and at a price I would not wish on anybody, that a man who sits in a counting house adding up what people are worth is the very last man on earth who should be deciding who gets loved. So I leave it where it belongs. Verity, you have lived in that house. I have not. Whatever he has done and whatever he has not done, you are the only person alive who saw it, and you are therefore the only person alive with the right to weigh it. Do as you think fit. Ruin him or keep him, and I will not have a word to say about it from where I am. I would only ask you this: do not do it the way I did. Do not be right at somebody for 19 years. Your grandfather, Josiah Halloway. The room was very still. Mr. Finch set the pages down and took off his spectacles, and polished them for slightly longer than was necessary. Verity sat with her hands flat on the table and did not move for a long moment. Then she got up and walked the length of it, past 11 people, and stopped in front of her husband. "You knew none of this," she said. "No. On the steps at Wells, yesterday, you did not know one word of it." "No." "And in the Sessions house?" "No," said the Duke. "Say the rest of it." He looked at her, and understood what she was asking for, and said it in front of the whole room, because that was the new price of things, and he had discovered he could pay it. "I believed you had brought me nothing," he said. "I believed it in March, and I believed it in June, and I believed it on the 18th of November when I put you out of my house in the rain. I never once looked for a reason to think otherwise. I had a steward who told me you were worthless and a wife who did not argue with him, and I chose the version that let me go on being angry, because being angry was easier than reading a ledger." He stopped. "There is no part of it I can explain away. That is all of it." "And the 22nd of November, said Verity, "the night you agreed to marry Lady Amelia Vance." The room did not breathe. "I did that too," said the Duke of Ashbourne. Verity nodded slowly. Then she went back to the table and picked up the 4 pages of the schedule and held them. £61,000, 900 acres, every stone of a house with a black and white hall in it where she had stood twice in front of 12 servants. "Mr. Finch," she said, "if I call these in, what happens to the tenants?" They would come to you with the land, your grace. Their leases stand. And if I do not call them in, then they remain as they are, which is to say, Finch chose his words, which is to say, at the discretion of a gentleman who has recently informed a magistrate that he cannot count. Yes, said Verity, that is what I thought. She turned to her husband. I am going to tell you what I want, she said, and you are not going to like all of it. I am not forgiving the debt, not 1 shilling of it. Ashbourne stays mortgaged to me, and I shall hold every note, because my grandfather bought them to protect me, and I am not going to throw away the only thing he ever actually managed to give me. The estate goes into trust. Mr. Finch will draw it. The tenants get their leases in writing, at a rent set by the trust and not by you, 31-year leases, and the repairs come out of the estate, and they come out first, before the house, before the horses, before the wine. The books are opened every quarter to the bank, to me, and you will sit with me while I do it, and you will learn to read them, and if it takes you 2 years, then it takes you 2 years. Yes, said the Duke. I have not finished. Verity's hands were shaking now, and she let them. I am not coming back to Ashbourne Hall as your Duchess, not this month and not in the spring. I have a house in Queen Square that I have never seen, and a bank I do not understand, and a grandfather I met once in the rain when I was 10, and I am going to sit down in the middle of all of it and find out who I am when nobody is telling me I am worth nothing. You may write to me. Verity. You may write to me, she said, every month whether I answer or not. My family has a way with letters. You will find it runs in the blood. And the Duke of Ashbourne, who had lost 900 acres, £61,000, a fiancé, a steward, 4 horses, and his reputation in 3 counties in the space of 11 days, stood in a counting house in Queen Square and started, very quietly, to laugh, and then stopped, because it had turned into something else on the way. Every month, he said. Every month. For how long? Until I answer one, said Verity. She put out her hand, not for his hand, palm up, the way a person holds it out when they are giving something back rather than taking. He did not understand at first. Then he did, and took the bandage off his own palm, the bad one, the rope tear that had never been dressed properly since the night in the kitchen, and put his hand in hers. It has gone septic, said Verity, looking at it. I told you it would want looking at again. Yes. You are an extremely stupid man. Yes, said the Duke of Ashbourne. Say my name, she said, the way you did in the library. I have thought about it for a fortnight in a room with a stone floor, and I should like to hear it again in a room where nobody can take it away from me. He said it. And 11 people in a counting house on the north side of Queen Square looked very hard at their papers, and Mr. Abel Finch, senior partner of 40 years standing, wrote nothing at all on the sheet in front of him for some considerable time. Josiah Crale was tried at the January Assize on 11 counts and transported for life. He sailed in the spring, in the same season, on the same tide, and very nearly on the same ship as the one he had arranged for the Duchess of Ashbourne. The £3,000 was never recovered. Verity did not much mind. As she remarked to Mr. Finch, it had been her own money going round in a circle for the better part of a year, and it had at least had the decency to prove something on the way. Epilogue a year on. He wrote every month, as he had been told to. The first letter was 4 pages, and she did not answer it. The second was 2 pages, and she did not answer that either. By the 5th, he seemed to have understood what the thing actually was, because after that they stopped being appeals and started being reports. The Wick roof is finished. It took 9 days and not 11, because Tom Wick's grandson is 15 now and worth 2 men. The slate is the wrong color, and the whole village has an opinion about it. Mr. Ellis has 40 children. He says this is because the mothers heard that the school teaches Latin, and they have decided Latin is respectable. He has asked me to tell you that the boy who could not read the slate, Peter Sallow, now reads better than his father, and that his father cried about it in the churchyard and denies it. Mrs. Pike is back. She would not come back to the same wages, and told me so to my face in the hall, and I have raised them. She says the east wing chimney has not drawn properly since 1798, and that she has told 4 dukes about it, and none of us listened. I have let the shooting to a man from Bristol who I do not like. It is £200. Mr. Finch has the papers. He never once asked her to come back, not in 13 letters. She noticed that and thought about it a great deal, and came to understand that he had worked out something that most people never work out, that asking would have made it a favor, and she had had a bellyful of being at the discretion of a gentleman. The 13th letter in December had no letter in it at all. It was the quarter's accounts, 11 pages of them in his own hand, in columns, with the rents and the repairs and the timber and the trust's disbursements all set down, and the figures added at the foot of each page. On the last page at the bottom, under the total, he had written, "I did these myself. Finch has not seen them. There are 4 errors that I know of, and I have marked them, and I have not corrected them because I want you to see what they are. It has taken me a year to be this bad at it." Verity Halloway read it 3 times in a house on Queen Square, where she now knew every room. Then she sent for the carriage. She did not answer the letter in the end. She never did answer one. She simply arrived at Ashbourne Hall at 4 o'clock on the 23rd of December with 11 pages of accounts in her hand, and walked into the library and said, "2 of these are not errors. You have got the Michaelmas rents in the wrong column, but the arithmetic is sound. And if you tell me you did the arithmetic in your head, I shall not believe you." And the Duke of Ashbourne stood up so fast that he knocked over a chair. That was a year ago, near enough. The house has changed, and not in the way that houses in stories change. It has not been made grand again. The east wing is still shut, because it costs £11 a month to heat, and the money goes on other things. The trust does not permit vanity, and the trustee is not a sentimental woman. But the Mill Lane Bridge is stone now, with a rail on it, and there is a second schoolroom, and every tenant on 900 acres holds a 31-year lease with the repairs written into it in plain English. And there are 241 people on that land where there were 211. The books are opened on the first Monday of every quarter in the library with the fire lit. He does them. She checks them. It takes 4 hours and they argue for most of it, and Mrs. Pike brings tea in twice and has been heard to say, in the servants' hall, that she has worked in that house for 48 years and never once heard laughing come out of the library on an accounts day, and that she does not know what to make of it and does not intend to try. Above the fireplace in the great hall, the black and white hall, the one with the 9 dead Ashbourne men on the walls and the floor she stood on twice, there is now one small frame. It is a plain oak frame, 4 inches square, with glass in it and a worn silver bank token behind the glass, and underneath on a card, in a woman's small even hand, HALLOWAY and SONS Bath, 1 shilling payable on demand. Guests always ask about it. It is the only thing in that hall worth less than £100, and it is in the best position in the room. The Duke tells them it was a gift from his wife's grandfather. That is all he tells them, and it is perfectly true, and Verity has never once corrected it in front of company, though she generally has to leave the room. She is 6 months gone with the child now, and it has been a nuisance, because Mr. Finch is 72 and wishes to retire, and there is a great deal of business, and because the Bath physician has views about carriages which Verity considers superstitious, and has said so twice, in writing. She still goes down to the village. Not to so, Mrs. Braid has 2 girls under her now and does not need her, and charges the hall proper rates and is not shy about it. But she goes down on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there are 41 children in that school, and 11 of them are girls, which was not the case 2 years ago and took a certain amount of arranging. They still call her Miss. She has never corrected that either. There was a man at the door last month. He was a timber merchant from Bristol, up to buy the standing oak on the North Ridge, and he had done a great deal of business in a great many great houses, and he knew exactly how it went. You dealt with the gentleman. If the gentleman was out, you waited for the gentleman. It was not complicated. He was shown into the hall, and there was a woman in it in a plain dark dress with her sleeves turned back, kneeling on the floor by the hearth with a great chart of the ridge spread out flat in front of her, and a pencil in her mouth. He waited a moment for somebody to come. "You'll be Mr. Havard," said the woman without getting up. "Come and look at this." "I thank you, ma'am. I'm to see his grace." "He's in the North Field until 5 and you'd be wasting your time. Come and look." The Duke of Ashbourne came in through the side passage 20 minutes later, in a coat that had been mended twice, and found a timber merchant from Bristol on his knees on the floor of the great hall with his hat off, and his best offer coming apart underneath him. "Your Grace," said the man, scrambling up, visibly relieved. "Your Grace, if I might, I've been trying to explain to this lady that the figure I've put on the North Ridge is a fair one, and I'd rather settle it with yourself." The Duke looked at the chart. He looked at the pencil marks on it, which were not his wife's careless ones but her working ones, the small hard ones she made when she had already decided something and was checking it a 4th time. He looked at his wife, who did not look up. "Mr. Havard," said the Duke of Ashbourne, "I own 900 acres, 4 horses, and every debt on this estate, and my wife owns the debt." "Sir, she is the one you need to ask," he said, "not me." And he took off his coat and got down on the floor of the black and white hall beside her and asked her what she had found. "Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.